Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro first. Alrighty, for those of you who do not know the story behind this video, Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, left an indelible mark on the history of crime in the United States. Born on February 29th of 1960 in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez's early life was fraught with adversity, setting the stage for a very gruesome and horrifying crime spree that terrorized California between June 1984 and August 1985. This analysis delves into the life and crimes of Richard Ramirez, exploring the factors that shaped his descent into darkness, his horrific acts, his capture and trial, and eventual death in 2013. Richard Ramirez's childhood was marked by a turbulent family environment. His father, Julian Ramirez, was an alcoholic prone to violent outbursts, subjecting Richard and his siblings to physical abuse. This environment, coupled with an early initiation into drug use and criminal activities, set the stage for Ramirez's dark path. One of the most disturbing influences on Ramirez was his older cousin, Miguel, or Mike Ramirez, a Vietnam War veteran with a history of brutal war crimes. Mike shared gruesome stories and photos of his murders and crimes with his young cousin, sparking a morbid fascination in Richard. Under Mike's guidance, Richard learned military skills, including stealth and nighttime tactics, skills he would later employ in his criminal activities. Additionally, Ramirez developed an interest in Satanism and the occult during his adolescence, further deepening his descent into darkness. By the time he moved to California at 22, he had developed a drug addiction and started committing burglaries to simply sustain that habit. Ramirez's reign of terror began with the murder of a 9-year-old girl in San Francisco in April of 1984. However, his identity remained hidden in regards to the crime until 2009, when DNA evidence linked him directly to the incident. His gruesome crime spree gained notoriety with the murder of a 79-year-old woman in June of 1984. Ramirez's MO involved breaking into homes, committing vicious murders, and often burglarizing his victims to support his cocaine addiction. His crimes escalated, including shootings, sexual assaults, and acts of sadistic violence. One notable survivor, Whitney Bennett, narrowly escaped death when Ramirez attempted to strangle her with a telephone cord. He fled, believing that divine intervention had saved her. In addition to these horrifying acts, Ramirez was also responsible for a series of home invasions where he subjected his victims to unspeakable horrors. Ramirez's capture came as a result of a combination of factors, including eyewitness accounts and the discovery of his fingerprint in a stolen vehicle he had abandoned. A media frenzy surrounding his crimes led to his eventual identification. On August 30th of 1985, while trying to evade capture, Ramirez was recognized by a group of elderly Hispanic women who called him El Matador. Seeing his face on the front page of a newspaper, Ramirez panicked and attempted to flee. After a series of events involving carjackings and pursuits by citizens, he was apprehended and severely beaten by an angry crowd. Police arrived, took him into custody, and the Night Stalker's reign of terror was finally over. Ramirez's trial began on July 22nd of 1988, during which he displayed erratic behavior, raising his hand with a pentagram drawn on it and shouting, "Hail Satan." He was convicted of all 43 charges, including 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. On November 7th of 1989, he was sentenced to death in California's gas chamber. During his time in prison, Ramirez attracted a following of admirers, one of whom he actually married in 1996. However, his horrific crimes continued to haunt him, and new evidence linked him to additional murders, such as the 1984 murder of Patty Elaine Higgins. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, remains as one of the most notorious and disturbing serial killers in American history. His troubled childhood, fascination with violence, and descent into Satanism and drug addiction contributed to a year-long crime spree that terrorized California. Ramirez's capture, trial, and eventual death offer a chilling glimpse into the mind of a complex killer who left a trail of destruction and suffering in his wake. His crimes, marked by brutality, sadism, and complete disregard for human life, continue to be a chilling chapter in the annals of American criminal history. In today's video, we're going to be going through and analyzing some of his nonverbal communication centered around interviews that he held in 2 different times, both of which were during his captivity, to be able to see what we're able to about the psyche that drove the person behind this. Perhaps there's some emotional leakages, some emotional tells, speaks of psychology and psychopathy and such in the interview, so it's going to be an interesting one all the way around. Let's go ahead and dive right in.
What do you want the world to know about you?
The world has been fed many lies about.
Gonna go ahead and pause here. So the initial question that we're working with, what do you want the world to know about you? He sits back a bit. However, we're not seeing any defensive gesturing. We're not seeing crossing of hands. We're not seeing prolonged eye blinks, anything along those lines. What we're seeing is him looking down his nose at the interviewer, and this is a level of superiority that he's feeling in and of himself. Now, while he's talking about what the world has been told, you could see a little bit of action coming into the corner of his nose, indicating a level of disgust as to what the world has been told about him. And he's going to say that there's a level of lying and such that has been told about him. It's a fascinating thing. Let's keep watching.
I have read very few truths.
Who are you?
So when he said read very, very few truths, he does a little lip compression with a mouth shrug in there and a look up off to the side. So this dismissal and uncertainty, it doesn't lend me to believe that there were actually that few of truths spoken about him. Perhaps there were some, and there always is, especially in the media. There's always going to be some form of fact that's been twisted. But from that little splash of nonverbal communication there, I would not necessarily actually believe that there were just so many lies that were being told about him at this time. Let's keep watching.
Just a guy. Just a guy. I have friends.
So he's sitting there again, something that seems to be characterizing his nonverbal communication in this first interview here is a level of light contempt. You can see a small smile coming into the one side of his face, and this would be an indicator of moral or intellectual superiority, which honestly is a very common expression to be seen when speaking to serial killers and criminals in general, is this level of I feel better or above the people that I'm talking to. It can be a defense mechanism. It oftentimes is an actual indicator of their mindset. However, we're seeing it here, and we're being able to kind of make note as to what Richard behaved as and thought as he was going through these. Let's keep watching.
I have friends. And that is all I care to say, really. They are open-minded people.
Did you kill 13 people?
It would be improper for me to comment on my LA convictions and on my pending case here in San Francisco.
Why?
So something that I do want to make note of as well is that he continually is checking down at the table. So you'll see him look down a lot. And the reason for that is that he has a script, a number of answers that he's wanting to be able to deliver. And this is not a secret to the people that are interviewing him. This isn't unknown. It's very clear. And I believe they even make note of it in the actual interview, is that he's reading from this script quite regularly. So that also lets us know that to some level, this is going to be difficult to see non-verbally, to see if he's being genuine during those times because it's fully scripted. However, along with that, we could still pay attention to any of the micro expressions or just any of the nonverbal leakage that we might be able to see what's backing the words that he's saying, even if they are fully scripted. So let's keep watching.
Why?
Because of my appeals.
Are you appealing these because you say you're innocent? You didn't kill 13 people?
All right, say you're innocent. He breaks eye contact off to the side, does a lip compression, and a little bit of contempt comes into the side again of his mouth there. So that, again, lets us know that he's having negative feelings and a level of moral or intellectual superiority with that question, are you actually innocent? So during this time, he's possibly even feeling a level of frustration starting to creep up, as we saw with that lip compression in there, with the interviewer's questions as far as how they're directed, the way they're framed, and the only answers that are able to be given for them. He might be getting frustrated with the interviewer at this point. Let's keep watching.
That is correct.
You didn't kill 13 people.
Again, it would be improper for me to comment in any.
A lot of dismissal nonverbal communication here. He is starting to get a level of agitation and frustration towards the interviewer on this and repeating his words. It would be improper for me to comment on blah, blah, blah. So he has a certain mindset that he wants to be able to convey with this interview, and the interviewer is not following along with what that mindset is for him. Let's see how that plays.
In any regard to that question.
You have now entered a very rare group of people in this country. You're in the ranks of Charlie Manson, Ted Bundy. You claim you didn't commit these murders, but you're right in there now as far as everybody else is concerned.
Serial killers do on a small scale.
Interesting. So during this time, I'm noticing that he is having a smile. It does seem to actually be slightly reaching his eyes as well. He also has a reposturing as he's doing this. So this reposturing means a change of mindset and perhaps a change of role within the conversation itself. It's a change of dynamic when you see somebody go through a reposturing. So he goes through a reposturing when he's being compared to these other large names in true crime. And along with that, we're seeing that small smile that does lightly reach his eyes. This could be a level of happiness or glee that he is, in fact, being compared to these other names, which does pull in a lot of questions about what his motivation for his crimes were. Oftentimes it can be, especially in the area of when a serial killer is caught, it can be a level of gloating and glee that they have done such a horrific thing and it's affecting so many people and they feel like they're getting attention from that. So that could be what's creeping in here. And now he's going to respond with an interesting response that doesn't really tie in exactly with what the statement that had been stated said. So let's see.
Small scale, what governments do in large one. They are a product of the times, and these are bloodthirsty times. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough, but then again, maybe they don't.
Do you have emotions, Richard?
I'm going to go ahead and pause this here so you can hear that he's reading. You can hear that this is rehearsed. You could tell by the flow and cadence of his words. You could also see him regularly checking down. I'm also hearing him start to increase his breathing. So that respiratory increase is fascinating to me. It's a level of agitation for sure. Now, what that level of agitation is in regards to is where there's more questions about it. Could it be anger and frustration as to what's being spoken about and he's not really conveying what he wants to, or he's not feeling like he's being heard the way he wants to be? Possibly. It could also be just general nerves as he's trying to present this script area to somebody and try to say it and react to it and have it all juggle around well. It could also be in that realm as well. So we're seeing these different areas of possible frustration come up throughout the prior portions of the interview. So that could also mean that these increased respiratory actions could be an indicator of that frustration again. Let's keep watching.
Do you have emotions, Richard?
No comment.
Tell me what kind of emotion.
No comment. He has a pretty massive expression of contempt in there, that moral or intellectual superiority. Again, this is an area where he feels like he's above the interviewer or the question that's even being asked. But while he's saying no comment, you see an ever so slight micro head shake. Yes. So with that in there, then I would believe, yes, he does have a level of emotions. Perhaps it's not to the level of the general public, but he does have it there even from his own nonverbal seepage, that little slight head nod yes in regards to his no comment. So yes, he did, but again, perhaps not to what would be considered societal norms. Let's keep watching.
What kind of emotions you got going through you right now?
I'll tell you what, I gave up on love and happiness a long time ago.
Why?
I don't care to explain that.
What are the emotions that's going through you right now? I tell you what, this is a domination phrase. It's used to be able to take a step up and to explain something. Now, that's also something that's commonly used. It's just a phrase, so it's something that we want to be able to take note of culturally and also just verbally in and of itself to be able to kind of understand where he's coming from. So not too much can be said on that front, but then he starts to list what he's not feeling instead of what he is feeling. So again, he's dodged this question as to what he's feeling a couple different times, but he says what he's not feeling. And then when questioned about what he's not feeling, you could see a little bit of a manipulator come in around his mouth and a little flash of disgust coming in there as well while he says, I don't feel like talking about that. So he has a level of disgust towards the emotions that he is not willing to say that he feels. It's all fascinating, and all of this is still being masked by this level of contempt and superiority. Let's keep watching.
Let the quote stand for itself. People in this day and age are brainwashed and programmed like a computer at being nothing more than puppets. This nation, this country is founded in violence. Violent delights tend to have violent ends. Madness is something rare in individuals, but in groups, people, and ages, it is a rule. Killing is killing, whether done for duty, profit, or fun. Men murdered themselves into this democracy.
You got to.
Very fascinating take that he's being able to put forward here with the building. He's more or less what he's doing is playing the numbers game for himself. He's saying, yes, I've done bad things, but so have a lot of other people. And in fact, not only just a lot of other people like you might be thinking, but a lot of other people in different areas have done just as bad things, depending on how you look at it, is his excuse, his reasoning for things. So he's trying to cast this wider net, which does divert attention from himself on some levels and tries to play down his own actions by saying that there are plenty of other people that do similar actions. And again, using another person's experience or actions to justify your own doesn't actually hold up. It doesn't work. Each and every person's individual actions are their own responsibility. So he is trying to play that game here. Let's keep watching.
You're good at reading your script, Richard, but you're not much at answering my direct questions. A lot was made that you're a devil worshiper. Do you worship the devil? Have you ever studied Satanism?
There are different sects of Satan.
Okay, so during this time of the devil worshiping question, again, we're seeing just repeated reposturing. He's also checking his notes regularly to be able to see where this question is going and what he can and cannot answer with it. So that reposturing is fascinating to me. It indicates there's a level of agitation. He's shifting around psychologically. I'm wondering if this is him preparing to be able to blow smoke. Perhaps he's preparing to remember. There's something that's happening psychologically. Then he sits back and he does a fairly pronounced and stilted sigh. It doesn't flow with anything. And so this sigh feels again like he might be running low on air. And this is all still centered around a couple of different possibilities for emotion. Perhaps he's feeling frustrated again, and these sighs are of exasperation and frustration, and he's just getting frustrated. Could also be that he doesn't feel like he's getting enough air, and that would be in the area of nervousness or fear. So there's two possibilities for this. His nonverbal communication itself is not conveying fear on any level outside of these respiratory difficulties, whereas we've seen some other indicators of contempt and anger and frustration seep out nonverbally. So with that, I would be encouraged to say that these sighs would be more tendent towards that frustration side of things, but it is still something to make note of that it could be nervousness. It could be fear that he's actually experiencing, and he's simply trying to mask it with everything else. Let's keep watching.
Sects of Satanism.
Have you studied, just yes or no, have you studied Satanism?
Yes, I have.
Are you a worshiper of the devil?
Interesting, where he says, yes, I have. That initial pitch, that pitch increase is a bit of a tell as well. Again, as you know, if you've been on this channel for a while, when you hear that pitch increase, it's a sign of agitation. It doesn't necessarily mean nervousness. It doesn't necessarily mean anger. It is a sign that there is agitation behind those words. That increase in pitch means that there's tightness in the vocal cords and a little bit more force while you're trying to push out the words. So with that in mind, that level of reaction to the repressing and re-pushing of, do you partake in Satanism? Is that something that you do? And his response is yes. So we're knowing that he's frustrated or he's feeling agitated, centered around that specific question being driven home twice. And from what I understand, if Ramirez is actually frustrated by this, it's not because he's frustrated at being linked to Satanism, but more so he's frustrated that his point of being linked to Satanism is being missed. He feels fairly misunderstood, largely misunderstood. His frustration seems to be centered around nobody understanding what he's thinking and trying to present. So let's keep watching.
The devil.
No comment.
Come on, Richard.
I can tell you a little bit about Satanism.
Well, I'm interested in hearing what you got to say.
It is undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. It is power without charity. Well, Satanist admits to being evil.
Do you admit to being evil, Richard?
We are all evil in some form or another, are we not?
I'm asking you the questions, my friend.
All right, so during that, we are all evil. So initially he has a small nose shake in there. Now it could be a micro nose shake. It is fairly large, so possibly it is consciously controlled. If it's consciously controlled, that likely means you would not likely believe, but we are all evil. So you would not, we are evil. And then after that, and then would you not say, he starts to switch around and the synchronization comes out with the head nods in there. I do believe that he believes that everybody on some level is evil. Again, for him, what I'm understanding is that he feels like he's not being understood, and he might feel like he's an outsider. So he's trying to present all of these different things that minimalize what he has done and makes it to where everybody else has done something similar. And now he's also made it to where everybody else is kind of evil as well. So him being evil isn't that important. So we're just still seeing this numbers game being pulled up here. Fascinating thing that we're going through. Let's keep watching.
My friend.
Yes, I am evil. Not 100%, but I am evil. Evil has always existed.
He looks down and then he looks up and says, yes, I am evil. There's affirmative head nod. He leans forward. And when he's saying, yes, I am evil, he doesn't break eye contact. There are no indicators of blocking gestures or defensiveness in his nonverbal communication. Again, I do believe that he feels that he is evil. Again, he tries to play it off as everybody is evil, but he is evil, and he's not showing any signs of shame centered around that. So he perceives evil in the world, and he perceives evil actions being done as something that just is, and not something that should be steered away from or prevented. Let's keep watching.
Has always existed. Perfect world most people seek shall never come to pass, and it's going to get worse. The great epochs of our life is when we gain the courage to rebaptize our evil qualities as being our best qualities.
All right, so now we're on to a different interview at a slightly different time here. And so, again, he gives this very stilted, scripted response about rebaptizing our bad qualities as our good qualities. And so you could see this moral mix-up that he's trying to present here as well, muddying the waters as much as he possibly can. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to this other interview here to see what else we're able to kind of glean from that, and then we'll talk about it at the very end.
They didn't particularly care for people. These things, contribute to a person, to a person's frustration and anger, and at some point in life, he explodes.
Why on earth?
All right, so now in this interview, we hear him clearly speaking about anger and frustration and the explosion that can come from penting those up and holding those down. So we do know at very least that the anger side of things was a fairly decent driving point of his perception. Now, with that, if we take that into consideration with his feeling of perhaps isolation, of being misunderstood and unheard, and feeling like he needs to justify his own negative actions by saying everybody else does it, if we're understanding that, we're really getting a feeling that Richard was a very angry, isolated, upset, and perhaps lonely person that just wanted to be able to express in a way that he felt would get him attention. And obviously this was not the healthy way to do this. So we're seeing this come out from him. We're understanding a lot of the emotional drivers behind him. Let's keep watching.
Why on earth would you have hurt those people? Why did you kill those people?
No comments.
Okay, why did you hurt these people? Why did you kill these people? We're seeing a substantial amount of contempt again coming in on the one side of his face with a lopsided smile, moral and intellectual superiority. And then he also does a breaking off to the side with his gaze as well. And you can see a little bit of a smile has reached his eyes. So he's feeling a level of happiness and contempt in regards to those questions. And then he does a pretty substantial reposturing and a manipulator around his mouth as he says no comment on that. So he has something that he feels perhaps a level of excitement or happiness about in there. Perhaps it's centered around the control that comes into this. Perhaps it's centered around the feeling of power that goes into that as well. But then he also feels like he should not be saying it, ergo the no comment, and even going so far as to do the mouth blocking manipulator there as well and the reposturing. All of that is a fairly substantial red flag for me just in his nonverbal communication as to what he could be processing and the reason for that. And if you've watched the rest of this video, then you kind of understand what it was that he was experiencing that may have actually pushed that to come to the surface. Let's keep watching.
Comments. I cannot answer that at this time. They are desires, whereas if I didn't give in to them, I would be crushed by them. I believe in the evil in human nature. This is a wicked world. And in a wicked world, wicked people are born. I'm not going to blame society, my race, or people or anything.
So what I'm noticing during this time is that he's having more difficulty vocally. He's not flowing as smoothly. Now, I'm also paying attention to where his eyes are going, and I'm not noticing him checking any one area on repeat. So with that in mind, what I'm believing is that we're hearing more genuine verbiage from Ramirez at this point instead of a scripted response that he had in the prior interview. So with that, that would explain why he's having so many ums and uhs. It does indicate a level of psychological processing that's increased behind that, meaning that he is having to think more about what he's saying before he's presenting it, ergo, and we're still seeing this thought-provoking manipulator here. You will commonly see people fidget with this area of their face when they're thinking. So we're seeing that pop up there. Let's keep watching.
It is up to the individual like myself to keep on knocking on whatever door they want to get into. And as far as Satan is concerned, I'm
going to go ahead and pause that there. So his thing that he says here that I will at least attribute to him is that he's not trying to push his actions off onto anybody else's responsibility. He's not trying to dodge responsibility in that area. He's trying to own up to that while also saying he couldn't do anything to help it. He said that earlier, like it's just, you can't do it. It builds up and builds up and builds up, and eventually you eventually break. So he's saying that he had no choice but to do so, but he's also then not saying that anybody else forced him to do so, which is fascinating and something that he does hold to. The approach that he's been taking, instead of that diversion of responsibility by saying it's somebody else's fault, he tries to divert responsibility by saying everybody else also does bad things. So really, how bad is everything if everybody's doing bad things? So that's his level of dodging responsibility. Let's see how it plays out. There's only a few seconds left.
As far as Satan is concerned, I believe in a malevolent being. His description eludes me, but I have felt powers that are evil. I don't care about myself, really. I don't care about what happens to me. I never did, really.
All right, so wrapping up there, talking about his belief in Satan, didn't see anything that was indicating that he was perhaps trying to play this part up, put it on for show or for theater. It does seem as though he does genuinely believe in Satan, and the limitations that he's feeling in that belief are existent as well, non-verbally. It seems synchronized. Then at the very end, as he's talking about he doesn't care about the various things, including himself, the no shake in there is synchronized in that as well. So all of that does push me to believe that perhaps that is how he's viewing things. So my feeling overall on Richard Ramirez is that, again, I think that he perceived himself as misunderstood, as isolated, as unheard, and he wanted to be able to enact power and feel empowered, especially considering the childhood that he grew up with in an abusive family. The lack of power that the kids often feel in that is very, very difficult for them to shake as they continue to grow older. All of this was likely centered around his feeling of isolation and need for control, all of it fueled by anger and frustration at people not understanding him, and it bubbled out into a nightmarish scenario that was the Night Stalker. So that's my feelings on that. Let me know in the comments below if I've missed anything, if there are any other clips or footage from him that you would like to be able to have me take a look at. Let me know in the comments below. You've got all of your different social medias. The channel memberships are open if you would like to be able to support the channel in that way. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.